Hello, hello, Dr. Alex here with you. Welcome to Alex Unplugged. I'm very, very, very glad that you are here. Today, we are going to talk about something that is both a little bit personal, a little bit general, and it's on the topic of projectors, and this is in the context of human design. So the reason that it's personal is that I'm a projector. So there are certain things that I certainly notice about myself that fit the projector vibe. And then there's projectors, while not super common out in the world, not terribly uncommon. And when you're talking about leadership and coaching and practitioners, there tends to be a higher percentage compared to the collective number in general. And so, anybody who works with people, when we are talking about patterns, these kind of discussions can be really helpful. Now, there's 2 points that we have to talk about before we get to this topic. One of them is human design. So, if you are listening along and you haven't heard too much about human design is a energy classification system, and it is a way of classifying people based on energy centers that they have opened or closed in their field. And it is actually a relatively complex system that has a lot of nuance to it. It's very, very cool. There's people that dedicate their whole life to studying human design and working with people doing sessions on human design. The way that Megan and I view it is that it is an additional tool, an additional system, and a framework that can be used as part of a larger system that cultivates self awareness in someone and helps to elevate their perspective in life as they evolve and grow and become whoever they want to be. Human design, then, when we think of it as a system, to us is just part of a much larger framework that takes into account the various aspects that make up who someone is. For example, human design can be one way of looking at it. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert is another way to talk about someone's behavior. Uh, there's the personality tests that exist out there, masculine and feminine energies and dynamics, right? There's many aspects of human beings as beings, and therefore there's lots of ways to talk about the complexities of being human. And so human design to us is a very, very helpful tool, but to us it is best used uh, in its proper place as part of a bigger picture and a larger approach. Which leads me into point two that I'm going to make about human design is that if that's the case, if we use systems of thought that help us bring self awareness to ourselves and others, that means that, you know, at least the way that I logic it out, is that no one system completely and truly captures who someone is, right? Just because someone says or identifies being an introvert does not mean that in every situation and every single thing that they act exactly the same way, right? That's not true. And so it doesn't encompass all of who we are. And to me, that is also true of human design. And that is why I think it makes the most sense to layer things because of its self awareness. Well, then, and no one system is complete, then having the layering of it makes it a more effective way to have that self awareness, right? So that's how I think about it. That's why I encourage people to not take to heart the designations that human design has as part of it. So it says, okay, projectors wait for an invitation, and people are like, okay, so I don't initiate anything, right? That is a gross generalization and kind of misinterpretation of that statement of, well, projectors can self-invite, right? And that's that feeling the invitation on the inside and initiating something. And so um, when or projectors need a lot of rest, and people are like, well, gosh, I'm in bed for 12 hours and 10 hours, but like I'm not really tired anymore. Should I keep doing this? And it's like, no, right? So that's the kind of thing where anytime we try to artificially retrofit our complex beingness into a smaller system, there's always going to be hangups. And that's where people, try to be a projector or a manifesting generator or whatever it is. But if it's not truly authentic to who they are, there's usually problems along the way, and then people sometimes get disillusioned, or they're like, this doesn't make sense to me, or there's something wrong with me, and what often follows is guilt and shame in the emotional body. And so these things are meaningful because if we care about things like confidence and high self-worth and empowerment and being who we want to be in the world, we can't create systems of thought for ourselves that make us feel bad about ourselves, that make us try to be who we're not, right? That those are two completely opposite, like opposing concepts that you just can't do at the same time. So when we have these discussions, these are broad strokes discussions. Yes, I personally am a projector, but do I fit every single designation that a projector has, and as it's been described? No, right? And certainly personal sessions with people can be more insightful and are more insightful, but nonetheless, as an expert in transformation, for me, I don't see the point, right? If I'm always going to choose who I want to be next and transform into it, and be in charge of the identity that I want to cultivate for me, which only I can decide, well, then I'm not, I'm not sticking within a system like that, because I can be whoever I want to be. So, anyways, those are my kind of initial thoughts for setting that up. Nonetheless, all that being said, I do really like human design. I think it can be a very helpful way of thinking about ourselves, and that generally speaking, people will identify with those broad stroke statements. And so, projectors are a classification that tends to be the way I describe projectors, or me being a projector, is that we can sense the energy around us easily. That certainly has in details, things have to do with open centers in the body. But we feel the energy, and we can either send it back out by amplifying it, or we can countercurrent and project a different energy. And so in practical life, what does this look like? This is the kind of thing that as a projector, I personally notice if I'm in a group of people and things are not going smoothly. If I lose my stuff, things will get exponentially, where the whole room begins to ramp up. And I don't even have to say, I'm not necessarily trying to look mad. I'm not saying anything. I'm not yelling. I'm not acting out. I'm just sitting there and I'm like internally screaming, the subtitle. It doesn't matter whether I share it or not. My energy speaks, and it's like the internet's gonna go out, the electricity's gonna mess up, the AC's gonna break, just like chaos ensues time and time again. And if you're listening and you're like, is that true? You can ask Megan. And then alternatively, if I'm great and I walk into a room and people are upset and whatever, and I sit there again, not saying anything, not looking in any certain way, whatever, I'm just sitting there, I'm happy, I'm good, I'm chill, things simmer down and people calm down. So that's the kind of patterns that projectors tend to notice about themselves. And that's the kind of thing where people will be like, is there a sign on my forehead of like, why do people just come up to me and start sharing? Now, projectors aren't the only classification that will elicit some of that, but it tends to be quite strong, right? If you can match energy with someone and make it a safe space, inherently they tend to open up. And so that's just a little bit of the setup of how I think about projectors. Now, projectors as Creators then is how the usage of that, what I just described. Projectors then are kind of the designated creators, creatives, visionaries, thought leaders, that kind of the people putting together thoughts differently than other people. Tends to be the descriptions given of the use of that energy. That is not to say other designations can't also be leaders and all of that, but that is the classification as projectors are. As creatives and people who are open to energy and integrate lots of different energies and make it into a soup and then bring our own magic to it and put it out into the world, that the propensity to be able to do that and then honing your skills to do that well, it tends to come with some trade-offs. And for projectors, other than getting into the thought of how a projector should act, one of the sticking points that I see most often across projectors that we work with, and we tend to track, like I said, a lot, what they tend to have in common overwhelmingly is the uh, the propensity, the leaning towards going to confusion when things get tough. So it's kind of like, one way that you could say is coping mechanism. Although I don't tend to love that, because people take that to heart in like a shamey sort of way. But it's more of like, what's a comfortable fallback for someone to be? So let's talk about why that's common in projectors, and I certainly relate to this one, because when you dabble in being open to the unknown, and then working and communing with that unknown and creating something new internally, you tend to become habituated to that opening of possibilities, right? And what's interesting is that for projectors, that part's really fun when we are in the flow of our creative energy, and our energy is doing its thing, and we're integrating stuff, and we're creating something new, and we're sharing something that hasn't been ever said in that way. It lights us the heck up, right? That's where we feel our energy replenishing, where we feel like we're really at our best often. And that, the downside of that is that when we are comfortable with that, it can be uncomfortable to then go back to a situation where you have to close possibilities and land on one thing. So when people are doing transformation, where they have to do deep digging, or they have to acknowledge something that they don't really want to look at, or come out of a pattern that they don't want to let go of, you have to close the other possibilities and land on, I'm making the decision to do X. I'm making the choice to pursue Y. I am going to do this, right? That you by definition, in making a decision, you're also making a decision about what you're not going to do, or vice versa. What you're not going to do, right? You're taking out what you are going to do. And so with that, there tends to be a rub. And for me, when we're talking about self-awareness, this is the fallbacks that we have, the comfort levels that we have. They are often the flip side of something positive too. And I would never exchange my projector creativity and thought leadership and how great I feel doing that just to not have confusion. I would never do that. For me, it's a matter of having these discussions where I acknowledge my patterns, and I say I tend to fall back on confusion because it leaves me options. I hear my own desire to have options. I am willing to sit and have journal sessions with myself, or even do voice memos to myself where I ask, like, how else do I want to give myself possibilities and options? How can I make myself, how can I give myself more leeway and wiggle room in life? How can I not box myself in more? But on this, I'm not going to go to confusion. On this, I'm making a choice. I'm not going to that familiar spot. But at the same time, I'm unwilling to gaslight myself on what I need. I am definitely going to give myself the open possibilities that I'm craving. But I have decided as an adult, as in my own inner parent, that this is the decision that I'm making and that this is one I want to make and I'm gonna, right? And or whatever it is, I'm going to work through this, I'm going to acknowledge this, I'm going to address this, I'm going to think on this, I'm going to talk about this, what, fill in the blank in terms of what practical life situation you could be in, or your clients could be in if they're projectors. But this is how I tend to interact with this state of confusion, right? Because when something is nuanced like this, overwhelmingly good, ooh, I can't talk, overwhelmingly, strong suit of somebody, but comes with a downside, how do you not, how do you need to think about that topic? How do you need to chew on the nuances that you hear in this complex situation that need to be addressed for yourself, while at the same time acknowledging, I no longer want to live out this pattern. This is not going to be how I approach my life moving forward because I choose to, right? And in general, this approach tends to feel good to projectors because in thinking through ourselves like this, then what we hear is how many options we do have. No one's making us do anything. And in transformation, that is always true. Because projectors tend to be a little more touchy on that subject, right? And so the reassurance and having ways of thinking about ourselves that remind us this is not about somebody else telling me what to do. And whether you are getting coached or you're listening to this as a coach yourself, who's a projector, or you have clients who are, and you're going to help them see through it, it's really more just having that understanding of where the sticking points in the situation going to be and how can I help someone walk around them? How can I acknowledge what role they play in being able to choose? Because as we all know, when the going gets tough and we didn't choose something, what is the first thing that someone does? Point and blame their point their finger at whoever made them do it, right? And so in transformation, it is always self-initiated. But with this particular discussion, the self-initiation actually really is a balm against this problem because it helps soothe the reason that a projector wants to go into confusion and to meet that desire to keep things open and free and expanded and just, completely unknown. And when we have to put it down on a page, all of a sudden it becomes real, right? And so think on this, whether it's you or you're coaching, how does this apply to you or the people that you work with? And then let's expand it even more. If you're a different human design, what are your patterns? What would be your equivalent of this? What does this mean to you? And maybe if you were, especially if you're someone who thinks about human design as part of coaching or leadership, then having a baseline understanding and thinking through the different categories can be incredibly enlightening, and it can also really help in coaching to have thought about it beforehand. And then when you see the pattern, you can immediately recognize it and you're equipped to handle it right then and there. And like all good coaching, create tasking for follow up that will further solidify a person's identity in this new way. So that's what I have for you today on Alex Unplugged. I'm so happy that you joined me. Megan and I had we're hoping that we could get a couple more reviews or lots more reviews, and we would love, love, love it if you'd be willing to share this and leave a review for us. We would really super appreciate it. And if you already have, then we thank you very, very much. We are at 2 million downloads here for the podcast, and we couldn't be more thrilled and couldn't be more grateful to have all of you helping us out, sharing, listening, commenting, emailing us. We so, so, so appreciate you, sending you lots of love, and we'll catch you next time.